Welcome to the Creative Plan Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews of items, and convention panels, and other exciting things that we run into from time to time. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and RPGpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Hey guys, Jim here with Creative Plan Podcast Network with Kelly. August
Hello.
the 3rd, RPGaDAY2020. I've got a little string to tug on here, Kelly, because you know what today's word is?
I do, as a matter of fact. It is thread, a subject that is near and dear to my heart. Okay. Again, I tend to think literally, especially, being a sewist. First off, actually, when you post this, Jim, I'm going to want you to also post a picture, because in Threads, since I sew, and with the whole COVID thing, I've actually made a few RPG
Oh, yes,
masks.
you have. You've made some fantastic masks.
I have. I have a couple more in progress right now. Because, hey, if we're going to have to wear masks, which I'm all for, then let's make it something that means something to us. So I actually ordered fabric. I ordered it from Spoonflower because they custom make fabric. I ordered some fat quarters, which is like 18 inches by 24 inches. Now you don't get the full that with Spoonflower because it's printed fabric, but in some RPG designs that they have available. So I'll have Jim post a couple pictures, because I made those with thread.
And every gamer knows if you wear the proper equipment, it will give you +2 to Constitution save and +2 to Charisma saves in these environments.
Yeah, I get compliments on them. But then I also thought for thread, it reminded me of Ariadne's thread in Scion, where you can track or trace the thread of fate on something, which is an interesting sort of, spell or ability in Scion. So those are my 2 items for thread.
See, that's pretty good. I mean, and I like the fact that you tugged on that story thread that I threw out there. So for me, it's going to be story threads and how to tug on them. So as a GM, of course, you're constantly wanting to bait your players with ideas and concepts, and you're throwing all these little story threads out there, and you're hoping to see which ones they'll pull.
Dangle stuff in front of us.
Like an angler fish with his little glowy bait wanting to chomp on a smaller fish down at the bottom of the ocean. So one of the big things is with adventures, we all know you can throw out story threads and they will ignore them because they aren't properly cued to what they are, I think is the big thing in my opinion.
Or we'll pull on the wrong one and unravel the whole thing.
And then all of a sudden the tapestry just falls to pieces. The Norns are sitting there scratching their heads at what happened, The oldest Norn cut the character.
Murdering hobos.
But it is kind of important as a game master to know what the story is that you're trying to tell as a group. And if the players aren't tugging on the story threads, that's a big problem. So sometimes it does help to possibly either out of character mention the whole, hey, you're getting the idea that this is the story thread and not just a random hobo talking gibberish at you guys while you're having a bar fight because you got distracted that the bar maiden noticed you stealing from her tip jar, as adventurers sometimes do.
Never!
And don't be afraid.
At least not this one.
Don't be afraid as a player to ask, questions, in character. What does my character think? Okay, so rather than everyone rolling insight, and basically doing repetition until they finally hit, yes, the person is not telling you all the details. In fact, the dragon rescued the princess instead of kidnapping the princess. But don't be afraid to take story threads and roll with them. And as a GM, one of the big ones is don't be afraid to throw out your story threads. Sometimes, you just pulled the wrong color for the fabric you're sewing on. And once you put a couple stitches in, you notice the fabric clashes with what the players want to do. And you have to...
The rule of thumb is you go with this slightly darker tone. It tends to blend better.
I'll remember that next adventure when it goes really dark. And you're like,
wait a minute.
What just happened? I guess the players will bring the levity.
Hopefully. Great, Kelly. Thanks. Now everything's all dark and gloomy. We have you to thank for it.
Hey, I love doing Gothic-y style gameplay. I like the Day of the Dead in D&D. That's a fun story thread to throw out there. Not to mention using story threads to foreshadow where the story is going, and that's always fun too.
Dun, dun, dun.
Besides, those players out there that want character development, if you don't tell the GM what story threads you're interested in nibbling on, how are they going to know what to dangle in front of your characters? I mean,
Yep.
if you want to play Call of Cthulhu and your character is the chef, I mean, he's going to throw an investigation story out there until you tell him, I need a culinary nightmare. Tentacles souffle. So if you don't communicate, how do you know what story threads are wanting to be used? Because that's how most GMs will figure it out, is what do the players tug on and throw out the rest. Because obviously, GM's not going to waste their energy writing a story that the players aren't interested in, right?
So you're throwing out a gill net.
That could be the story thread you're going for. Just cast the net. Maybe it's one of those 200-mile long nets that those massive ships throw out there. Because sometimes that sounds like a Rift game. All the kitchen sink, including the house.
Yeah, there's Aquaman, Cotton, the Little Mermaid, and
little flipper thrown in there.
Yeah, I think we've
tugged that thread.
Cross threads now.
We've de-threaded it.
No, it's now not. Cross the threads.
Okay, so that's probably a good place to snip those loose threads and call it a day then. Hey, you brought up the seamstressy talk, so I'm just going to play with it. Alrighty, guys, I'm going to say thank you for listening and have a good day. #RPGaDAY2020.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. And feel free to enjoy our other shows, such as D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Scion Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion hero to Ragnarok story. Thank you for listening.